So, Sean,
Yes,
what
sir.
made it so important for you to tell the story of the Stalking films?
It's a great question. Um, well, my dad was a Navy SEAL for 30 years, and I grew up in Imperial Beach, this community down in San Diego, and I basically grew up in like a Spartan community, if you're familiar with like 300. The
Right,
Navy
yeah.
SEALs just live there, and when you live in that community, you grow up around it. And the PTSD I saw there is not the PTSD I saw represented in Hollywood. And I started writing this with Jordan in 2015. And my dad ended up killing himself this year from PTSD.
Oh, man, sorry to hear that.
I know it's a heavy one, but it's so important to this project, obviously. And all my work, what I discovered retroactively when I looked back at all my writing, it had been about PTSD. And I had developed things and parts of this movie with my dad because he would talk about, like, oh, that's not really what I see from my guys, like what Hollywood does, all these tiers is how he'd call it. He's like,
Right,
usually they do something like behavioral avoidance, which is you get into a car accident, you don't drive anymore. So for a SEAL, it's like you get into a firefight, you don't fight anymore. So I just kind of, Jordan and I kind of like, how do we Trojan horse this conversation with a more entertaining movie?
right.
And that's what we aim to do. And that's where my heart lies. So this for me is always a conversation about PTSD and suicide, and that's where this film comes together for me. But
Right. And
what an experience!
I'm from a military background as well. My dad was in the Navy Seabees for 20 years as
Oh
well.
wow,
So,
wow!
yeah. And
So you get it.
I volunteer at a VFW here too. So all that PTSD and stuff
Yeah,
like that I see here and there around, just volunteering at the VFW here.
I
So,
bet, dude. I bet the VFW is an incredible place to go visit and really meet the men and women of that served our country. It's
and that's
yeah.
and that's another
Go-
thing I wanted to talk to you about. You mentioned bringing up the details correctly because that's something Hollywood gets wrong. It's gotten
Yeah.
to the point I try to watch less Hollywood military action or films with my dad because he pays so much attention to the details of the uniforms and stuff like that as well, like how they have the stars or the stripes on the uniforms. And
Mhm.
so, how important was it to
Yeah.
you to get the details in just everything in this film as well, not just with the PTSD, but how the military is perceived as well?
You know, it was really important and it wasn't. I have sort of a different perspective on it because my dad was in the special forces. I don't want to give away tradecraft, like flat out. Like sometimes I'm watching these movies and I'm like, I can't believe they're giving that away. And so our director is an Army sniper veteran. So I already knew I could trust that. And what I've noticed over the years, like Jordan, he's an attention to detail guy. But at the same time, I'm like, we're trying to tell a story that everybody can get on $100,000 budget. We shot this for $100,000. So we did our best. I obviously talked to my father extensively. Rick, the director, had literal personal military experience and combat experience. So I felt like we were in good hands and also was okay with not being exact because I don't want to give away our information to anybody like that. It
Right.
is a movie and I value the safety of our personnel over the particularization of a detail that might not affect the story.
Right.
If I'm on as a filmmaker, I'm like story above everything else, and that's the way I try and simplify it for myself.
and that's an interesting point of view. Also, dealing with movie and pitching the stalking films as well, and that had to be an interesting pitching process because, like you said, the filmmaker was an American Sniper as well. So, with everybody on board, how did the meetings go to kind of pitch this movie around with it being so close knit with everybody involved?
Yeah. No, it's a great question, man. For me, like as a filmmaker, I try and build a community because I realize like we spend so much more time making the movie than we do watching it. So we might as well really enjoy that process. So I almost everybody I hired I had worked with before. So people were happy to work with me. Do you know what I mean? It was
Right.
almost like
Yeah.
they were happy to connect with me as the artist. And then they got the script and were like, oh, this is cool. And then it became a collaborative effort, which is my favorite part of filmmaking is like, what do you think? Oh, great. Maybe I think this on top of your idea. And we just keep building until we have better ideas. So it is weird. Like it was just Jordan and I in the beginning. We had this investor, this Mexican investor. She was rad, but she ended up falling out. And so Jordan was just like, fuck it. And he doubled down with his investment to cover her.
Oh
And
wow.
yeah, we were just, and I had this real heart to heart with him in his driveway. I try to do with every one of my investors, by the way, because it is a lot of money and you want to make sure people aren't selling their house or, like
Right.
you don't want that stress coming on the set. And so I checked with him and was just like, are you sure? And he's just always been that way, a cowboy. And so that really energized, and you need energy to fulfill. I mean, I don't know if you heard me. I said 2015, right? So
Right.
that's
So
seven,
it's a
eight
long time.
years.
Yeah.
So you got to kind of stay in the fight, and you need these pockets of inspiration. And so once Brooke and Tori, the other two main producers, got involved, and Rudy and Josh came along after that, and Rick, the director, all the meetings were very similar. Like they were down to meet and then excited once they heard the project and what we were going after because we all knew it was risky. Rudy had made movies independently before, so had Rick. Everybody else had experience in the realm, so everybody knew like attainable but really difficult. So let's go for it
Yeah.
because I always try and hire artists that the project's going to elevate a little bit. Like I don't want someone on set who's like this is so easy, or because they may be excellent, but if they're not challenged, that energy can bring
It kind
down
of
the
goes
set.
down. Right.
Yeah.
So, how do you feel with, you mentioned you've been working on this since 2015 and now it's getting ready to come out. So, how does that make you guys feel that people are getting ready to see this in the public as well?
No, it's thank you. Mixed, I this isn't my only project, right? So this is like one of five, luckily. And so it's a baby of mine, but I made 100 short films. I made this, that would have been my third feature. Like I feel excited. I feel grateful. I also feel ready to put her down.
Right.
I basically personally been the lead on everything. Not to say I've been alone, but like I've been, let me go find this out. Let me figure out this out. Let me run this session. And it's a bit exhaustive, obviously. So it's mixed. I feel really grateful, proud. When we wrapped, I was already so proud. So proud of the effort. Like I said, we shot this for 100 grand. Like I
It does not
challenge
look like
most.
that at all. The editing on this was
Thank
very
you.
good as well.
Oh, full credit to Rudy. We sat in there with for a lot of sessions, but he's an amazing artist, and I absolutely attribute that to his professionalism. He's the man. If you can work with him, you're in good shape. So yeah, and then Nick Acosta, our DP, like really just visually took care of us. Just a total talent there. And basically, that's what you have to do in indie producing is call all your resources without burning those bridges. Because some of the best advice I got early on from this gentleman who had won like 17 Artois awards, which is like an editing Oscar. So he'd been around, and he said, "It's really easy to make one movie, really hard to make two." because
Right.
everybody burns their bridges. So I really had that in mind. And we had our kerfuffles because it's a movie. I mean, dude, we were filming up in Tahoe during a blizzard. Like all this wild shit was happening. So, as movie producing goes, it's just overcoming a lot of no's until you're finally done.
Right.
Yeah.
So, Sean, do you have any upcoming projects you'd like to plug before you leave?
Yes, sir. So let's see. I just produced this movie called Good Bad Things. It's in post right now, feature film. Shane Stanger directed. It's an amazing project. It's basically a coming of age story where this young man is starting to love himself and he happens to have muscular dystrophy. And so what we really tried to do with this project is not make it about his disability, because that's what we feel was happening in Hollywood. It's like, look at this minority group, look at this diversity group. Let's kill the story just to focus on the fact that we hired an actor like this. And I'm just like, no, just do what the BBC does and just hire the actor and play the story out. And when the disability or affliction comes up, we can tend to it, but we're not going to make it all about that. And so I'm really proud of that. I was a lead producer on it, and I made a risk. We did like shorter work weeks, shorter hours. Because for me, one of my gripes with Hollywood is that we don't have to be killing ourselves to make a ha-ha. Like
Right.
movies are my church, yet I still have the perspective that they're not life or death, right? And so it was cool to risk. And our DP is no slouch. He's walking off Avatar 2 through 4
Oh,
as a
wow.
camera operator. Yeah. And he was in tears at the end because he didn't think a Hollywood set could operate like this. And you start to understand, like, those days off in between, you start to marinate with the material more, and the material becomes stronger and you're ready to get back, rather than those 5 or 6 day slogs where you're just like, oh, I don't even want to think about it on my one day off. And then shortly, my dad passed in April, and I was poised to direct this project I had written and produced, a TV pilot, 3 weeks later. And it's like the biggest opportunity of my career. And I really sat with it, and I still went ahead. It's called Helmet, and it's the best work I've ever done.
Well, I look forward to seeing.
Yeah, thank you, brother. Thank you. And I decided to go forward with it because I needed the distraction, honestly. And there were 35 jobs on the line. And as you know, like, get one of these pictures together is a miracle, man. Like, the acting has to be good, the sound, the picture, the editing. Like, it's a miracle that any of this works. And so when you got an opportunity, you got to kind of go for it. So those are the two things coming down the pipe for me: Good Bad Things and Helmet, which is a TV show.
All right, Sean, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been fun and nice meeting you, and congratulations on the Stalking films.
Thank you, sir. What a pleasure to talk to you. I hope to do it again.